Our guest in this segment is the Attorney General, J.B. McCuskey, from one J.B., Johnny Bodwell, to the other, J.B. McCuskey. J.B., good morning to you.
Morning, fellas. How is everybody?
Doing well. How about yourself? How are things in the Capitol?
It feels kind of like I called into sports talk radio.
Yeah, what's on your mind there? It's J.B. from Charleston. You're on Sports Talk.
Hey, first-time caller, long-time listener.
Oh, thank you, Jay. We put a nickel in the can there for you.
I'm gonna hang up and let you talk.
Yeah, what's your take on that, WNA?
Yeah, the best was when they'd call and they'd be like, they just need to use the fullback and wear yellow britches, and I'm gonna hang up and let you talk.
Why don't they hand the ball off from the 1 yard line? Why are they rolling out, throwing a pass?
Holy White sitting on the bench.
All right.
That was always my favorite.
JB, thanks for being a first-time caller. I get a little change bonus whenever I get one of those. Hey, let's talk state of Maryland. People might be saying, why would you be asking
the
Attorney
talk about Maryland. I'm
General of West Virginia about the state of Maryland? But you're involved, JB, with the state of Maryland because of a decision they are making on coal that comes into the Baltimore harbor.
Yeah, and so, this is just sort of the typical playbook that we're seeing out of left-leaning states, and that is they don't like the way that America produces energy, and they are upset that we have a new EPA director, we have a new federal administration, and administration that believes that carbon-based fuels are the present and future of baseload energy production for America, and they're trying to use their climate activists to refill the coffers of their states, and we don't think that's fair. And so what Maryland's doing is essentially imposing a fee on coal that travels by train through their state in order to make up the budget deficit that they've created. And I'm not obviously in the Maryland legislature, but my assumption is by spending wildly on things that don't have a significant chance of being successful in helping the economy of Maryland. So we're not going to sit here and let Maryland take advantage of the fact that they have a port and we don't, and they have utilized West Virginia coal to for their own personal electricity and for years, and now they want to tax us in order to fill their budget deficit because they've largely been irresponsible with their budgets, and we're not going to let that happen. And we've asked by letter their legislature and attorney general to rethink this, what we think is a very silly policy, because, if this starts happening and all 50 states start taxing each other and finding each other for behavior that they find disagreeable, it's going to be a real hard country to live in, and we're really hopeful to sort of stop this before the slippery slope starts to happen.
In your press release, it says the bill is called the Coal Dust Cleanup and Asthma's Remediation Act. It says nearly all the money would go to fill Maryland's fossil fuel mitigation fund, and only 2% would be set aside to address asthma treatment or for communities impacted by coal. Where did you get that information, JB? Is that specifically spelled out in the bill, or did you have to dig around a little bit?
Yeah, that would be in the bill, and what we know is they always put stuff like that in the bill, and then where the money ends up is not into those places. I mean, we've been watching the federal government over the last 50 years, and the name of a fund is very rarely particularly descriptive of the actual purpose of it. And, at the end of the day, if Maryland wants to make all of their electricity with windmills and solar, they can try to do that, but my gut tells me that Baltimore and the rest of the state of Maryland will not be thriving when everyone's paying $3,000 a month for their electricity.
Yeah. So how much influence can you have on an act like that by writing a letter, JB? Does it come down to lawsuits?
It's interesting. There's generally pretty significant congeniality between attorneys generals, regardless of their politics. And as we've talked about before, we filed a suit against the state of New York for behavior that is not totally dissimilar from this, with their $750 billion, the $75 billion super fund that they are trying to levy against our coal and gas companies here. Just because you're adverse to somebody doesn't mean that you have to be hateful. And we're hopeful that Maryland will understand that, we're not going to stand for this. This is going to turn into litigation if they continue to go down this path, and we'll maybe rethink their position here, because we're going to win, and if they're doing this for just posturing and to placate their green donors, it's probably better for them to stop this now as opposed to make it even more expensive for the state of Maryland and then eventually probably lose.
It almost sounds like states are trying to return to colonial days when each state wanted to try to get some type of economic advantage on the other state by trying to tax goods that crossed borders and such. And I thought we had kind of done away with that behavior, but it looks like we're trying to retreat to it.
It is funny. I hadn't really thought about this, but it is interesting to watch those on the left lose their minds over the tariffs that the president is trying to do while simultaneously imposing the same and similar kind of things on their fellow Americans.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm opposed to the Trump tariff plan. I don't think it's going to work. I'm not really a big fan of tariffs
I wasn't
either.
Commenting on the efficacy of the tariffs. I was commenting on the.
I'm aware.
Talking out of both sides of your mouth.
No,
I mean,
I'm aware. My point was I'm not in favor of what Maryland is doing on that tax any more than I am a fan of what Trump is doing at the national level. I think Smoot-Hawley showed us that tariff wars don't work. Bill Stubblefield, go right ahead.
Maybe hold on one second, sir.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe we should just annex the western part of Maryland as the 56th through 59th counties, and then we can just run the train straight through there, and we don't have to worry about it.
Take it over. Yeah, good, Bill.
Good morning, JB. Good to talk to you as always.
Good to talk to you, Admiral. How are you, sir?
Very good, thank you. You mentioned New York a while ago, and you were on with us 3 or 4 weeks ago and mentioned your discussion with New York. Has that moved to the litigation stage, or still just if you continue down this path, we're going to take action against you? Where are we in New York?
Myself and 22 other Republican attorney generals, along with a coal company here in West Virginia and several interest groups, are all plaintiffs, and that case has been filed in the Northern District of New York.
Yeah. So we're moving
that is
ahead.
In the litigation stage.
Yeah.
Yep. And litigation is slower than we all want it to be, but we feel great about our filings, and we're really excited for that case to keep moving forward.
And I suspect you're using the New York case as leverage in your discussion with Maryland?
Well, we haven't actually had a discussion with Maryland. We have entered the chat, as the youth would say, and we're waiting for a reply.
Okay, good. Another question, shifting away from adjacent states. With the flooding we had in the southern part of the state, there's a lot of scams that's going on, and I think you've sent out some alerts to guiding people, warning people not to be taken by the scams, correct?
Yeah, and unfortunately, human nature just dictates that when there's a catastrophe, and this has happened probably since the beginning of time, scammers swoop in, right? And they recognize when people are in dire straits. They recognize when hearts are opening up to try to help others who are in dire straits. And, flooding events, hurricane events, high wind events, all of these things cause damage, property damage, and people get in, they're in a bad spot, right? They can't stay in their house, and financially it's very straining, and fraudsters pop up. And so a couple things are important. One, if you're somebody who's trying to donate money or supplies to help your fellow West Virginians that are struggling right now, make sure that the charity that you're working with is reputable, right? And there's a myriad of ways that you can do that, but the easiest is to go on the Secretary of State's website, make sure these charities are registered, and on sort of the same line, there's also charities that everybody knows are reputable, right? Like the Red Cross and Samaritan's Purse and these places. Find a charity that you know is real, where you know your funds are going to get into the hands of people that really need it. And on the other side, if you're somebody who has damage from a storm like this, make sure that when you're working with contractors, that the contractors who are promising to come in and fix your roof if it's a wind event, or help you clean up if it's a flooding event, are real licensed contractors that are licensed to do business in West Virginia and aren't going to take 100% of your payment up front and then do 25% of the work, because that's sort of a typical scam. And all of these things just, when people are stressed, it's a lot easier to make bad decisions. Weather events cause enormous amount of stress on people, and just make sure we're being vigilant. And if something bad does happen to you, the consumer division in our office is incredibly skilled and unfortunately experienced at managing these problems and going after people that have taken advantage of somebody.
What licenses should a business have if they come to your house in a situation like that, JB? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them depending on what service they're trying to provide. But there is a general business license to do business in West Virginia, and if you have to be registered with the Secretary of State for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is so that we can make sure you're paying your taxes. But if you go on the Secretary of State's website, ask them for their actual corporate name, make sure that they're up to date on their paperwork, make sure that they are somebody who has availed themselves to the state of West Virginia so that they can be regulated and monitored and ensure that their employees know what they're doing and that you are going to get the services that you paid for.
JB, the other JB.
Sir, we see a lot on the Facebook, okay, and in a lot of the Facebook groups where there are all these people posting fake jobs with, links to click on, enter all your information in. Is there anything going on? Is there anything more that people should know about this stuff? Because obviously they're all scams, just trying to get people's information so they can steal their identities or whatever other nefarious thing they want. But what should people be doing with stuff like that? Should they report it or?
Absolutely. Always report something that seems bad. I'll tell you one of the biggest scams that we have going on right now, and I actually almost got taken by this when it was so good, is you'll get a phone call on your cell phone and somebody will say, hey, you missed grand jury, and there's a warrant out for your arrest, and you have to pay us $1,000 right now in order for the U.S. Marshals not to come get you. And what was wild about it is I got the phone call in my car. They knew my name, my address, my birth date. They knew my occupation. They had all of this incredibly detailed personal information about me, and it was really nerve-wracking. And it wasn't until I got to the end where the guy was like, "Well, we accept PayPal." It's like, well, the federal courts don't take PayPal, right? But I'm a lawyer, the Attorney General, and at that point I was the auditor, and they got me for 7-8 minutes is how convincing they were. And so I can only imagine somebody who doesn't have the same kind of legal training I do getting that phone call and how unnerving and scary it could be. Call your sheriff's department if that happens, right? Your local sheriff will be able to help you as much as you can. We are in a constant battle against these scam calls. And the internet and social media has only made it worse. But there's been politicians since the beginning of cell phones who've been saying, we're going to stop the scam calls. We're going to stop the scam calls. I can't make that promise. It's starting to seem to me like the scam calls are probably impossible to eliminate. And I think the best defense that we can have is educating people about, what are the things to look for when one of these calls happens. And you don't have to answer every single phone call that comes into your phone. One of the things that I like to tell people is if the number comes up and you don't have it, let it go to voicemail. And if they don't leave you a voicemail that you want to respond to, just delete it. People treat their cell phones kind of like they're their home phones from 30 years ago. Just because your phone's ringing doesn't mean you have to answer it. And just because you got a text doesn't mean you have to respond to it. If you don't have the number saved, let them leave you a message and determine whether or not that's a person that you need to be communicating with.
Well, and most of these calls originate in foreign countries anyway. They're all done with internet-based phones where they capture a fake number with a 304 to make them look local. But
just because it's local doesn't mean you have to answer it.
Right.
Everybody that you really want to talk to, their number is saved in your phone. So try to
limit
the answers to phone calls you have to people that you've already self-identified as those you want to talk to. And if the person leaves you a real message, put them in your phone and call them back.
That's much easier with cell phones than our landline. In our case, we have both cell phones, but my wife likes the landline. There's no real way to handle landlines, is there? Because they
don't answer it.
Don't answer. That's the only one. But JB mentioned 30 years ago. So it's so ingrained in so many of us. If the phone rings, you want to do the courtesy of picking it up. Even though you're right, Rob. You're exactly right. Should not answer.
Well,
but tell my wife.
Well, in the past, you didn't know who was calling.
Yeah.
I mean,
there was caller ID.
You had to answer it to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean,
I've seen this with my dad. And he's a little older than me, obviously, but when his phone rings, he picks it up.
Yeah.
No matter what. And that's just how his life was, right? Growing up, when the phone rang, it was almost necessarily somebody that knew your number,
yes.
right? And the world has just completely changed, and you just don't have to answer the phone every time it rings.
When we eventually,
but you don't break habits that easy either. So the older ones.
Correct. That's 100% true.
yeah, when we eventually ditched our landline, it was because everybody who I knew was calling me on my cell. The only people calling me on my landline were scammers and such. It's charities and whatever.
And my wife and I have never had a landline, ever.
Because you're a young person.
I'm not that young. I was. We've started talking about how not young we feel recently.
Every morning you get out of bed.
You know, it's that you get past 41 and everything starts to hurt.
41.
41.
Bill's got suits older than you.
43. I'm just talking about for the last 2 years is when it started to hurt.
I tell you, I come into the station today and I look at my two compadres and I feel young.
You're a young man.
Because I am.
Yeah. You're still in your 50s.
You know, in the world I live, I am pretty young. I guess maybe that's why I feel so young. Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
And let the record show, I'm the oldest one here, but I still feel young.
Oh, and you act young too. Yeah.
You seem young. Yeah.
I if I'm acting as young as you are and feeling as young as you are at your age, life will have been good to me.
JB, what else do you got for us from the Attorney General's office? We have about 5 minutes left, sir.
I would say that we are just working super hard on a couple of really big cases that we are going to announce soon. We have a lot of opioid-related activities happening. We will be out in the Eastern Panhandle, I think, in the next couple weeks. But you know, we hired a guy named Josh Barker, who is our new director of substance abuse recovery outreach. And Josh is an addict who has worked with me for a long time. He's been a friend of mine for a long time, and he entered recovery and overdosed while he was an employee of the auditor's office. And so I got to sort of see from soup to nuts somebody who was healthy, somebody who got addicted, somebody who overdosed, and somebody who had to go through recovery, and then somebody who has rebuilt their life with his wife and his kids and his family on the other side of recovery. And it was really, really an eye-opening experience, obviously for him, but really for me too, to have gone through this with him. And what Josh is doing is he is going out and visiting all of the recovery homes in West Virginia, all of the sober living homes, all the recovery centers, and we're going to try to build a database of places that we know are doing it the right way, and places that we need to start looking at who may be taking advantage of addicts and extracting money from them, but not providing any of the substance abuse recovery services that we need. We know that the state is investing an enormous amount of money in this problem, and we know that the problem isn't getting better fast enough. I'm sort of somebody who believes that spending more doesn't always equal better results, and I think that if we start to really hyper-focus on the people that are doing it the right way and redirecting our funding away from those who aren't doing it correctly and getting more of it into those that are, we can both reduce the amount of taxpayer money that we're using to solve this drug crisis, but also start to help way more people who are ready to get clean. And that is, you know, one of the problems that we face is that frequently people will enter these treatment programs when they're not at the place in their life where they're really ready to get clean. And so we are spending a lot of effort in my office to both fight the people who are doing it the wrong way, but also to find the people that are doing it the correct way, because it is taxpayer money. The problem is real, and folks that are sick need a chance at a better life. They need one really good chance, in my opinion, to get better. And I think on the other end, we have to make sure that we are working with the foundation and the folks that are there to be investing in prevention, right? And everybody says that, and it is a sort of a trite thing. But if we don't have noticeably less drug addicts in West Virginia in 15 years, if we're having the same conversation, Katie, bar the door. We can't afford another cycle of this. And so we need to start finding actual solutions for keeping a much larger portion of the youth in this state off of drugs. And I think our economy growing and the level of hopefulness that people have in West Virginia and in their lives is going to play a huge role. But on the other end, we have to be better about making sure that less people are becoming addicted, because we simply cannot afford another cycle of this scourge.
JB, I have a question from one of our listeners, Michelle, who asks, the federal lawsuit West Virginia joined to challenge Section 504 Has that lawsuit been withdrawn, or is it still moving forward?
That lawsuit still exists. We worked with our partners in several of the other states to change some of the wording in that lawsuit. It is, I would say, there are parts of that suit that I wouldn't have written that way. For the people listening, what happened is the Biden administration added gender dysmorphia to the list of disabilities that are covered under Section 504. And what Section 504 does is it provides educational plans for students that have both physical and learning disabilities. It is an insanely important part of our education department. It's something that I have supported implicitly and completely my entire political career. I will not allow anything to happen to the 504 plans that our students and parents need here in West Virginia. And the lawsuit was designed to keep the list of disabilities from getting too long for the people that do have dyslexia and people who have Downs and people who have learning disabilities and physical abnormalities who really need extra help at school in order to keep up with the other students. These things are incredibly important, and parents, if you have a student who has a 504 plan, please know that I will always do everything I can to ensure that program is funded properly and that your students have all of the resources they need to be successful in school.
Thank you, Bill. 30 seconds left. Were you able to ask your question, Bill?
The coalition to ask the Senate to pass Halt Fentanyl Act. You're a part of that coalition.
20 seconds, JB. Quick answer.
Yes. Halt Fentanyl Act. We need the Senate to vote and pass this bill. It makes the component parts of making fentanyl illegal. So it makes it easier for our law enforcement partners and our first responders to arrest people who have component parts of fentanyl so that we can get more of that awful drug off the streets.
Thank you, JB. Appreciate your time as always.
Thanks, guys. You all have a great day.
You too.
Thanks, JB.